All right, let's really talk about Disney's live-action Snow White. Strip away the drama, ignore the online shouting matches, forget the memes for a second. Just look at the business side. Because financially, this wasn't just it underperformed, this was a $170 million lesson. Disney went all in on this. By the time production wrapped, the budget had climbed to about $336.5 million. That's blockbuster franchise territory. That's we expect global domination money for a fairy tale remake. Now, yes, filming in the UK helped. They received around $64.9 million back in tax incentives, bringing the effective production cost down to roughly $271.6 million. Still massive, still risky, still a huge bet on nostalgia. Opening weekend came in at about $87 million worldwide, which was already below projections. And when a movie this expensive opens soft, alarms start going off. Because films at this scale rely on momentum, strong second weekends, family repeat viewings, international surge. That didn't happen. It ended up ranking near the bottom of Disney's live-action remakes in total earnings. And here's the part a lot of people forget. Disney doesn't keep the full box office number. Theaters take roughly half. So once you split revenue and subtract costs, that shiny gross shrinks fast. After the math settled, industry estimates placed the loss at around $170 million. For Disney, that's not normal. The live-action remake strategy has basically been a money machine for almost a decade. Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, billion-dollar hits. Even when critics weren't impressed, families showed up. Parents trusted the brand. Nostalgia carried weight. But something shifted here. The movie carried controversy long before release. Casting debates, public interviews, creative changes, the CGI dwarves becoming their own discourse cycle. Instead of hype building excitement, conversation built hesitation, and hesitation is deadly at the box office. We're also in a different era now. Streaming changed everything. Families are more selective. If something doesn't feel urgent, they wait. Ticket prices are high, attention spans are shorter. We'll watch it when it hits streaming has become the default choice. When you combine inflated production costs, divided audience perception, and post-pandemic viewing habits, you get a perfect storm. And here's the real takeaway. This wasn't some small experimental film. This was Snow White, the princess that started it all. If even that brand recognition can't guarantee turnout anymore, that says something bigger about the remake formula. Because the formula only works when three things align: nostalgia, trust, and excitement. This time, excitement blinked first. So here's where it gets interesting. The problem wasn't just that Snow White didn't make enough money. It's that it cost so much that not enough turned into catastrophic. Spending over $330 million on production alone automatically puts you in a danger zone. That's Marvel-level risk. That's global event cinema expectations. But Snow White isn't a crossover superhero spectacle. It's a character-driven fairy tale. The scale and the story weren't naturally aligned. And when budgets inflate like that, every single weakness gets magnified. One major factor was the dwarfs. Early creative decisions reportedly shifted during production, leading to heavier reliance on CGI. Large-scale digital reworks aren't minor tweaks. They're expensive, time-consuming overhauls. When you're rebuilding character pipelines midstream, that's not pocket change. That's tens of millions potentially evaporating in revisions. Then comes marketing. Big tentpole films don't just release quietly. They require global press tours, premiere events, cross-brand partnerships, digital ad saturation, the full machine. While marketing numbers aren't publicly itemized, for a film this size, it's reasonable to assume the total investment went far beyond production alone. Now combine that with the revenue split. Theaters keep roughly half of ticket sales, sometimes more internationally. So even if the worldwide gross looks decent at first glance, the studio's share shrinks fast. That's where the math turns brutal. because you're not recouping $270 million, you're trying to recoup that from half the ticket revenue. And the momentum just wasn't there. Family films usually rely on strong legs. Kids drag parents back for repeat viewings. Word of mouth spreads through schools and group chats. But this didn't become that kind of cultural moment. It didn't feel urgent. It didn't feel magical. It felt debated. And that matters, because controversy doesn't always hurt box office. Sometimes it fuels curiosity. But in this case, the conversation didn't generate hype, it generated division, and division weakens family turnout. Parents don't want to walk into something that feels like discourse. They want safe, joyful entertainment. There's also a generational timing issue people aren't talking about enough. The original Snow White is iconic historically, but nostalgia economics are generational. Millennials showed up hard for Beauty and the Beast because that was their childhood. Gen Z embraced Aladdin and the Lion King reboots for similar reasons. Snow White reaches much further back. Its emotional imprint isn't as immediate for younger audiences. When nostalgia doesn't hit the right demographic at the right time, the safety net weakens. And here's the bigger shift: post-streaming audience behavior. Theaters are now event-driven. People show up for spectacle, for must-see moments, for shared cultural experiences. If something feels optional, they wait. And once "we'll catch it on streaming" enters the equation, theatrical revenue softens dramatically. Disney built its remake empire during a period when theatrical dominance was stronger. That environment has changed, which means the strategy has to evolve too. Because one $170 million loss? Survivable. Multiple at that scale? That becomes a trend. And trends are what scare executives.
Now here's the part that really says everything. After the theatrical run ended, Disney didn't treat this like a flagship remake. There wasn't a massive long-tail celebration, no overwhelming theme park push, no aggressive brand integration wave. The film kind of faded. And that's not random. When Disney has a hit, they amplify it everywhere. Merch explodes, characters appear in parks, streaming banners dominate the homepage. But when something underperforms at this level, the strategy shifts from expansion to containment. Because the remake formula itself isn't dead, it's just no longer automatic. Disney is still moving forward with live-action adaptations like Moana and others in development. That tells you they still believe in the model. And honestly, they probably should. The formula has generated billions over the last decade. One outlier doesn't erase that history. But this was a loud outlier. The real issue wasn't just audience hesitation, it was cost discipline. When you spend nearly $340 million producing a film, you eliminate your margin for error. If reception is anything less than enthusiastic, the math collapses. And enthusiasm is no longer guaranteed just because a castle logo appears at the beginning. Audiences are more selective now. Families weigh theater trips differently. Streaming windows shorten urgency. Nostalgia has to be timed perfectly, and brand loyalty doesn't override everything. Also, scale has to feel justified. Spectacle for spectacle's sake doesn't hit the same anymore. If audiences sense overproduction without emotional payoff, they disconnect. And once they disconnect, even a legendary IP can struggle. What makes this moment fascinating is symbolic weight. Snow White was Disney's first princess, the foundation of the animation empire. Nearly 90 years later, its remake becomes one of the most financially painful entries in the live-action era. That doesn't mean Disney is in trouble. They're a global powerhouse with diversified revenue streams: parks, streaming, merchandise, franchises. One loss won't shake the castle, but it does send a message internally. Big budgets require big conviction. Cultural timing matters, and audience trust can't just be assumed. It has to be earned every single time. If Disney recalibrates, tighter budgets, sharper creative direction, clearer marketing, the remake strategy survives. If they keep scaling without adjusting, the risk compounds. Fairy tales usually end with a happily ever after. This one ended with executives staring at spreadsheets and quietly rethinking how expensive nostalgia should be.
And in today's Hollywood, that's the real plot twist.